Hello all and welcome back to this week's Top 10 list. In this case, talking about 10 better ways that Elon Musk could have spent his money if he wanted to. And I want to be clear, there are a million lists out there of things that Elon Musk could spend his money on. It is very easy to figure out that X thing costs Y dollars so he could buy, Z of them. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about just random things that he could spend the money on. I'm talking about things where he would potentially be advancing the supposed goals that he actually has, which is his explanation for why he does anything. I just don't think that he's actually doing that by spending $44 billion to buy Twitter. I will also say, before I launch into this, I took a lot of notes for this one, and then decided I'm not going to make you bear with me through. I have a lot of thoughts about this because, look, not to become a downer or whatever, if you have a little bit to give and you don't, that's a little bad. If you have a lot to give and you just choose not to, then I think we can judge you even more. If you have the most to give and could give, even in advancing your own personal selfish goals and choose not to, then I get pretty pissed off. And I actually kind of made myself pretty mad putting together this list, which is not usually what happens. So I'm gonna run through these so that you know where I'm at, and you can tell me what you think. Starting off, this is an easy one, and this is the closest to the he could just buy X number of these things. He could buy a laptop for every one of the households, the 5 to 8% of households that don't have access to a computer. And think about that. That would be a gift in theory, but a tech gift from a guy who wants to be seen as a tech god that he could fill full of stuff that preloads Twitter and sends you to Tesla or whatever. He could do all of that very easily and be seen as the Johnny Appleseed of technology. He wants to be seen as a god when it comes to technology. This would be a very straightforward way to do it while doing a lot of good for people who need it the most. Obviously, he's not going to do that. So, okay. He wants to be seen, this is my second one, he wants to be seen as a genius. He wants to be seen as the intellectual, the free thinker, and he supposedly wants other people to be geniuses and to be free thinkers. He could be the father of American higher education if he wanted to. He could easily make public colleges and universities free or at least very affordable. At the very least, he could make community college free for literally anyone, if that's what he wanted to do. He could be the guy who gave a generation the gift of higher education that supposedly he has. I don't buy any of that, but if he wanted to, that's a thing that he could do. He could do programs to get people into coding and robotics and engineering and all of that stuff that he supposedly cares about. He could do that. He could do that. Okay, the next one, it's probably the easiest. He wants... This is me diving a little bit beyond just what he says he wants. What he actually clearly wants is to have people tell him that he's smart and funny and a genius and awesome and whatever. And I know that people throw around the idea of billionaires just buying themselves an island, but let's not skip past that too fast. I'm not just saying that he could buy an island and set up a house there. I'm saying he could buy an island, set up a castle, and then set up housing for 500, 1,000, 10,000 right-wing grifters and hangers-on and lackeys and minions. And they could just spend all day, every day, telling him that he's awesome. He could go to the Elon Musk corner store, the Elon Musk movie theater, and the Elon Musk gas station. Everywhere he goes, they would be paid to tell him that he's great, and he would get the feelings that he so desperately, feelings of acceptance that he so desperately wants. And he'd probably save a bunch of money to do it. Okay, the next one. He's buying Twitter because he wants to have this fun new toy that he can play with or whatever. Now, I have hobbies that I sometimes spend money on, and I often find that my hobbies are cyclical. That sure, there's the shiny new toy, but eventually I'm going to want the things that I have again. Could you just try psychologically to trick yourself into wanting them now? Is that a possibility? So this one is actually, don't spend the money. Don't spend the $44 billion. I want to be clear. Elon Musk has multiple companies that he's either in charge of or owns. You supposedly liked them at one point. Go do them. Go do your cars or your rockets or your tunnels or your flamethrowers or your brain chips or whatever it is that you supposedly cared about. Could you just try, if you're a genius, figure out a way to work yourself back into caring about those things? And then you could save a bunch of money and maybe actually make good on the promises of these corporations. Now, at this point in the list, we get back to the thing that started all of this, potentially even started him wanting to buy Twitter, which is when he was asked why he just doesn't cure world hunger, which I want to be very clear. Apparently, based on analyses that have been done, he could do it very easily for a tiny fraction of all of that money. In fact, if he were to choose to spend his money on curing world hunger, not only would that make him an icon historically for having done this, and he'd save so many lives, it would just be such an amazing moral good. He could easily afford to buy MySpace or something. If he wants to have a social media company, and then he could promote on that social media company this amazing good that he did that he's choosing not to do. Okay? Next up, he clearly wants to be seen as this cool figure. That's what the whole social media thing is about. This is why he so desperately wanted to be seen as Tony Stark or whatever. He wants to be one of the cool kids hanging out with other cool kids. Well, why not do that then? Here, think about this. He could set up a $44 billion patronage program for the arts, and he could help to launch the careers of literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of artists, actors, musicians, athletes, if he wants to, writers, every kind of creative outlet. And then when they make the cool movies and the shows and the books and the songs, he would be their patron. He really helped to get them off the ground. They'd probably look pretty favorably on him. Right now, I think most good creative people despise Elon Musk because of his personality and the awful ways that he has. But he could actually have them like him if he just used the money to help them rather than create a social media site where they can get, brigaded and, harassed off the platform. If you want to hang out with the cool kids, actually be cool for once. How about that? Here's an easy one. He loves to talk about going to Mars. You can go, honestly. You could build a fleet of spaceships, and you could, again, load them up with right-wing grifters if you want to, and then just go. You're never actually going to be that cool here on Earth, but there's not a lot of competition on Mars. So I feel like you could actually do that, and it would finally be making good on one of the promises you've made for your corporation. Just go. You might even have money to return someday. I don't think that should be a necessity for this idea, but I think that you should at least look into it. You keep saying you're going to do it. Just do it. Alternatively, I will give you a different version of this. He's not going to go and live on another planet or whatever. But he wants to be seen as a spaceman. Okay? He's going to compete with the other billionaires and then go into the upper atmosphere or something. Set up a moon base. That's got to be way cheaper and more feasible than setting up a base on Mars. It's way closer, obviously. You could actually do that and then potentially go there. You don't have to go there. But he could set up a moon base and make that possible, thus leading to future, generations of future space exploration, off to Mars and Jupiter and God knows what else. He could do that for far cheaper. It's almost weird that he doesn't at that point. And then that would be something that he'd be giving to humanity. He could make it an international thing if he wants to. Send engineers from all different nations. That would be one of the most amazing space gifts anyone will ever give to humanity. But I think he's probably not going to do that. So I have one more, and this is perhaps the most directly related to his use of the money on Twitter. Not for what he's really spending the money on. I've already addressed that. But what he says he's spending the money on. He says he's spending the money because he cares so much about free speech and fighting fake news and making sure that people have accurate information because journalism is so bad. When he says that, of course, there are certainly issues with journalism. What he is doing is the right-wing thing of any critical reporting is fake news. Remember, he's a billionaire businessman. He doesn't want people to have access to this information. So he doesn't actually support journalism and the free flow of information. But if he actually did, he could easily, for a tiny fraction of the $44 billion, give us back journalism. Think about all of the monetary woes of local TV news stations or local newspapers that have been bought up and monopolized by rich people. I guess I am talking about a version of that, but I'm sure he could set it up in a nonprofit way where he wouldn't have actual editorial control over these. He could give us international news reporting, documentarians. Like, he could get all of that set up throughout the country and internationally, by the way. And by the way, he might say, well, there's not enough good journalists for it. Okay, well, then you could provide a grant program for like hundreds of thousands or millions of journalists out there to put them through school and make sure that they learn critical thinking and researching skills and how to write and all of that. He could set up the education for it and the actual jobs for it very easily, thereby producing the informed, balanced electorate that he supposedly wants. But of course, he's not going to do any of this. He's not going to do any of these things. It has to be selfish. It has to be just for his own personal ego and edification. It has to be fundamentally pathetic. Let's be clear about that. So anyway, those are my ideas of things that he could spend the money on while advancing his goals, whether the ones he wants us to believe he has or the actual ones he actually has. And not just, he could buy 1 billion Subway sandwiches or whatever. And so anyway, those are my ideas. Let me know if you have ideas of what he could spend the money on. Maybe funding TDR. I don't know. You can post that down below. And while you're down there, let me know the top 10 list you'd like to see Francesca and I address. She will be back next Monday. We'll be doing the list together. Until then, I'll see you soon.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.